Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night, it is your boy BD, and welcome back to the Horror Tavern. Make sure that you take a seat, you grab a drink, and you get ready as we once again explore the limitless cavern that is the horror genre. And today is a very important video that I am doing, arguably one of the most important discussion videos on this channel, and that is me talking about what I believe personally is the best era for horror movies. This takes place in a certain decade of basically a timeline, I guess you could say, that I believe that in this decade the best horror movies were being pumped out, some of the best quality horror movies. And the reason why I decided to make this video was because I noticed a pattern that a lot of my favorite horror movies that I've been watching quite recently come from this specific era, and that's why I believe that this era has the best horror movies in general. You may disagree with me, you may agree with me. Obviously, the discussion of what we believe is the best era of horror movies can depend person to person. A lot of people tend to pick eras that they grew up with because they got a sense of nostalgia, they got a sense of personal connection to that. Some people try to find the objective best. I'm not doing that. I'm going to be picking an era that I did not grow up with, but I just happen to notice that as I'm watching all these movies, they happen to be made during the same time period. And I'm like, all right, there must have been some magic going on during that point. So that's how this discussion video came within existence. So hopefully you guys enjoy. If you do, hit that subscribe button down below, hit that like button. It's free and it means a lot to my channel, allows my content to get out there for you guys. Let me know what type of videos you guys like to enjoy. And yeah, hopefully down in the comments below, you let me know what your favorite era of horror movies is, whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, and any other specific movies within that era that you like that you think need to be highlighted. Today, I managed to pick out 5 horror movies from this era that I'm going to be specifically discussing, but I do got a list of honorable mentions that I do want to mention just because of how iconic those certain movies are. I may have not seen them yet, or I may not love them as much as some other people do, but I have to acknowledge the fact that they are quite iconic in the horror genre. But the main 5 that I'm going to be discussing are Hall of Fame horror movies, in my opinion. Ones that have timeless classic quality, ones that are extremely well done, extremely well made, hit a certain nerve that I definitely wanted hit, pause. And I think that, you know, a lot of you guys can at least respect the era and movie picks, excuse me, that I've done, and at least at the best, some of you guys will completely agree with me because I know some of you guys love these movies. So without further ado, let's talk about what is the best era of horror movies. And for me personally, from what I've gathered, the best era for horror movies is the 1980s. The 80s had a tremendous, consistent quality of great and iconic horror movies. There is a lot of iconic, famous, really well done, really well, revered horror movies that were pumping out during this decade. And from the horror movies that I've been watching, because I didn't grow up watching horror movies, so a lot of these horror movies that I'm watching, I'm actually watching quite recently. I'm just binging through them. So I'm experiencing them for the first time as an adult. So it kind of hits me a little bit different. I don't really got nostalgia for any of these movies. These are just picks that I believe have a certain level of prestige and quality and just love from me. So the 1980s hits a lot of those Hall of Fame posters that would be in my personal favorites. Some honorable mention movies that I do want to bring up that I may have not watched, or I may have watched but I didn't like as much, but I still think that they deserve a shout out for how iconic they are. First up is Friday the 13th Part 1 and 2. Friday the 13th Part 1 and 2 sparked up one of the most famous, one of the most successful, and one of the most iconic slasher franchises ever. Part 1 was a smash hit success, and Part 2, the sequel, I believe is even better than the first movie. I wasn't that big a fan of the first movie, but I am a fan of the second movie. So Friday the 13th Part 1 and 2, these are big horror movie installments to drop during the 1980s. Next one I have not seen, but it's Gremlins. Gremlins is one of the most iconic horror movies of all time. There's been a lot of spoofs and spin-offs and inspirations by the concept of it, but easily, Gremlins is one of the most iconic horror movie monsters and movies of all time. Next up, I have not seen this one, but it's The Thing. The Thing is widely regarded by a lot of people as not just one of the best horror movies of all time, but one of the best movies, period, of all time. So that deserves a shout out by the great and legendary John Carpenter. Next one is The Lost Boys. The Lost Boys is considered to be one of the best vampire horror movies of all time. I know a lot of people love that one, so shout out to The Lost Boys. The Shining, a adaptation of a Stephen King novel, one of the most iconic horror movies of all time, once again, starring the great Jack Nicholson. You have Sleepaway Camp. I personally was not a fan of this movie, but Sleepaway Camp is a cult classic. It's got a cult following of people who love the movie and think that it's very, very iconic. You have Hellraiser, another great one that people revere, and then My Bloody Valentine. So those are just some of the movies that are honorable mentions, one that I have not seen or one that I've seen but I don't regard as highly as other people do. But just the fact that they're that iconic and that famous, they deserve a shout out as a testament to what this era of the 80s was pumping out. Now let's get into the 5 movies that I do want to highlight a little bit in detail. So I picked out these 5. These are my Hall of Fame horror movies, some of the best horror movies that I've seen. I think these are timeless classics and they hold up no matter what time period you're watching it in, what age you are watching it. I just think they're fantastic through and through. The first one I want to talk about is A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. This is one of my favorite slasher movies so far, period. I love A Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger is a fantastic slasher villain. They did something really unique with him invading people's dreams. You get a lot of awesome action / horror kill sequences in this movie. The opening one with the bedroom where the girl is getting slashed and ripped apart by Freddy's knife hands, and the fact that she's getting basically pulled up onto the ceiling on some poltergeist shit. You got the hole in the bed, there's blood spurting out. There's an absurd amount of blood that's spurting out and freaking out the girl's boyfriend. You got the scene in the bathroom where Freddy, as the main character, is relaxing. He reaches a hand through and tries to grab her and then pulls her under the bathtub. And when she gets pulled under the bathtub, it's like abnormally deep because, again, she's dreaming. This shallow bathtub, when she gets pulled under, turns into this large, dark blue abyss of water that she basically damn near drowns in before her mother wakes her up. That's another iconic scene. You got some cool chase scenes. You got Freddy slashing open his body and the maggots coming out. He's a funny, iconic, really, really great slasher villain. There's so many, great scenes and great kills in the movie. It's got good pacing. It's a great package, and the ending to the movie is pretty dark and pretty haunting. So this is a Hall of Fame horror movie. I love the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. One of my favorite horror movies of all time. And I really think that it's such a unique idea for a slasher, and the execution was fantastic. So that is a staple gem of the 1980s. The next one on my list that I picked out was one movie that I covered recently, which is what I believe the most fun horror movie of all time. Iconic. There is no movie that is more fun than this one. Just let yourself get absorbed by the goofiness, by the cheesiness, and you'll have an amazing time. It is Killer Clowns from Outer Space, 1988. Killer Clowns from Outer Space is one of the most fun horror movies of all time. It has one of the best villains out there. The killer clown aliens are fantastic. The way they kill people in this movie is so much fun. They got these little blaster guns that can wrap these cotton candy cocoons around you. They liquefy, melt down your flesh and body until they drink you up with these crazy, twisty straws. They got pies that they can throw at you that melt you down like acid. They got this popcorn that clings to your body and helps them track you. They throw it out, it lingers on you, and when they sprinkle this popcorn in closed, damp areas, it can sprout into these worm-like clown baby leeches that attack you. Their spaceship is fantastic. It's got a lot of cool, fun circus stuff and extraterrestrial big monster stuff inside of that circus tent spaceship. You have the scene where the clown, puts on boxing gloves and punches off a dude's head. You got the scene where the clown alien is doing shadow puppets and makes a giant T-Rex that eats up the people. There's just a lot of great iconic stuff in here. This movie is just a whole lot of fun. It's funny, it's creepy at times, it's eerie, and I don't think you can have a better time than this movie when you watch it. So Killer Clowns from Outer Space being the most fun horror movie, in my opinion, ever, one of the best horror comedies of all time, and that came from the 1980s. it's a respectable diamond gem of the era. So that's another testament to the Mount Rushmore of the 1980s of horror. Another one that I want to talk about, the third entry on my Hall of Fame horror movies, is what I right now believe to be the best sequel horror movie to come out. And honestly, it's one of the best sequel movies in general of all time. And that is Halloween 2, 1981 by John Carpenter. Halloween 2 is a fantastic sequel. I personally love Halloween 2. I actually like it even more than the first movie. Popular or unpopular opinion, I don't know. But Halloween 2 is fantastic. It ramps up the action. It ramps up the kills. In the first movie, you got the mystery of Michael Myers being this ominous stalker slasher figure. But you see by the end of the movie, when he gets stabbed, when he gets poked through the eye with the hanger, when he gets shot 6 times, he falls off like 2 stories of the house and then walks away like nothing happened. That it's pretty much hinted from that point that Michael Myers is a supernatural threat, that there's more than meets the eye, because no fucking normal human can survive all that bullshit, no matter how much you try to come up with an explanation. And the second movie just maximizes on that. It makes Michael Myers into this ominous supernatural killer figure. He cannot be stopped. He really is the boogeyman. He's an unstoppable force. You got some really great kill scenes where the couple gets killed inside of that superheated sauna bathtub thing where the skin gets melted off. That's great. The one security guard getting killed is a very creepy scene as he goes door from door in the back of this hospital. I love the decorations in the hospital, the Halloween decorations. I love the atmosphere. There's the shot of the nurse walking through the CCTV camera footage, and then Michael Myers appears down the hallway. That's great. And then obviously the climax scene is very intense, very action-packed. You got a lot of explosions, a lot of fire, and you got basically Michael Myers walking out like the devil covered in flames, and it's really great. I just love Halloween 2, 1981. It's a fantastic horror movie and one of the best sequel horror movies out there. So this is another cult classic, a great one, and I gotta show respect to Halloween 2, another gem of the 1980s. The fourth on my list of Hall of Fame horror movies is one that I actually saw, I believe, a week ago. And this one is really dark. It's got a lot of gore in it, got some extreme horror. It deals with being possessed by demons. It has a lot of creepy and ominous imagery. It's got some horror comedy, some fucked up dark comedy in there. And that is The Evil Dead, 1981. Came out the same year as Halloween 2. The Evil Dead is another great, iconic horror movie. It has so much good gore in there. The possession of these people getting possessed by the demons is great. I love the practical effects on the demons. I love the way they laugh maniacally, how they play with your emotions. They act like little children. They fuck with you. There's a lot of brutal, disgusting gore in here. People being chopped apart, people being ripped apart. You got the cool, sort of creepy stuff involving the Necronomicon. The Necronomicon was made by Lovecraft, and it's been referenced and used by a lot of different authors and horror writers, and The Evil Dead maximizes on that. The Necronomicon brings to life these demons, gives them the opportunity to possess hosts, and makes for some crazy shit to go down. And that is The Evil Dead 1981 in the best description possible. It's a lot of crazy shit going down in the best way you can. It's funny, it's disturbing. There's a sexual assault scene involving possessed forest branches that was brutal. Again, when the demons take over these poor kids, it's brutal, and you get some comedy, you get some violent gore. Overall, it's just a great package. And you really feel for the main character, Ash. He goes through some fucked up shit. And when you finished the movie, you went through some fucked up shit. But again, in a really entertaining, really great way. So The Evil Dead 1981, that's another standout, hit it out of the ballpark movie that came from the 80s. And finally, the last movie that I want to cover in my Hall of Fame horror movies that come from this era is arguably the most important horror movie to me and the most important horror movie in my list from this era, which is Creepshow 1982. Creepshow 1982 is probably my favorite horror movie of all time. I love the anthology format of it. I'm a big fan of anthology horror. I love short story collections. I love anthology horror series. And Creepshow 1982 does not do any sort of wraparound segment where you're like in the middle of this town and there's different things going on in different houses in the town. No, they're completely unconnected, completely separate stories. You get, I believe, 5 different tales that happen in this movie, and they're great, man. They're great. There's a lot of good stuff in here. You get a good variety with the horror story segments in this movie. You have Father's Day, which is the weakest one, but it's still fun. It's a good schlocky, gory slasher with some fun elements to it involving the undead and vengeful spirits. You got The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrell, which is a story that's grown on me over time, no pun intended, because it involves a meteor that crashes down on a farm. The main character is played by none other than Stephen King. Stephen King is acting in this segment, and he plays this out of his mind hillbilly guy who lives out on this farm. And as he touches this meteor, these plants start infecting and growing all over his body, all over the house, everywhere he touches. And it's just a story of isolation, a story of going crazy. And there's some brutal body horror in this one, and a very disturbing death, and an ominous future of the earth. You got Something to Tide You Over, which I love this segment. Deals with a completely maniacal guy getting revenge and doing some serial killer shit on some people who are involved within an affair. And the way he does it is brutal. He buries them neck deep inside of the sand and lets the waves keep hitting them until they eventually drown, and he tries to see how long they can last. And eventually, when he thinks he's about to win, and he does manage to kill these people, there's some comeuppance and revenge that comes his way. And it's in a very disturbing, very creepy, very eerie manner. You also have the other story, which I forgot what it's called. The Crate. Never mind, I remember. The Crate is about the story of this guy who's very much upset with his life, upset with his wife, and he finds this crate underneath the bottom basement or whatever of this college university, and it has this creature inside of it, potentially like a baby yeti kind of thing, and it kills anybody that it comes into sight with, and it can be weaponized, and it basically gets misused as somebody tries to utilize this weapon to get away with murder and make their life easier. And finally, They're Creeping Up on You is a very disgusting, very disturbing story about a man who is very corrupt, very mean-spirited, and is very paranoid about cleanliness. And eventually his penthouse gets flooded by cockroaches. And what happens to this guy is disgusting, disturbing. It'll make you vomit, but it's fucking iconic, and it's fucking great. Creepshow 1982 is all around a fantastic movie. I love the anthology format of it. I love a lot of the story segments in it. It has a lot of good, consistent quality, and it formed one of my favorite horror movies / TV show media franchises of all time. I'm a huge Creepshow fan. I've seen all the movies. I've seen the TV show on Shudder. I've read the comic books. I love that series, and this is the movie where it all started. So these are the reasons why I believe the 1980s is the best era of horror movies. Let me know down below if you agree with me or disagree with me. Do you have a different era that you believe is the favorite or best of your personal opinion? Do you agree with my pick? Do you love a lot of these movies? Do you disagree? Do you have other movies you would have picked or put into place instead of my 5? You let me know down below. Put some comments. We can start a discussion. Just keep it respectful between each other and me. And yeah, that's my pick. These are the Hall of Fame horror movies that come from the 1980s. I think that this era cannot be touched, at least as of right now. It had consistent quality. It had a lot of bangers that were pumping out, and some of the greatest hits of all time come from here. So shout out to the 1980s, a truly legendary golden era of horror movies in general, and cinematic masterpieces. That's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, again, feel free to hit that subscribe button down below and hit that like button. It's free. It's an easy way to support me. Lets me know you guys are engaged, and it means the world to me. And again, comment down below your thoughts and opinions. Hope you guys have a God-blessed day, and that's all I have for this discussion. Deuces. Peace. As I forget to hit the stop button like a fucking idiot, but I got the suit on. I got the drip on, the professional drip, so can't be too harsh on me, right?